Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here. Welcome to another episode of UnWoke Academy. I'm your host. If you're following the 100-100 party, that is a countdown timer at 132 days, 10 hours, 56 minutes, and 13 seconds. Quick shout out to our distribution partners, OBBM Network and BlessedNewsTV.com. I can speak from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have a lot of background in content development, distribution, video, you name it. And OBBM has been a great resource, a spectacular help. Same thing with BlessedNewsTV.com. They have been a great ally in this whole campaign to get the message out about UnWoke. Speaking of which, we have an alert reader who has sent me a very interesting article that comes from Fox News Business pertaining to JP Morgan Chase, BlackRock, State Street Global Advisors, and probably a whole bunch of other ones. And this is some interesting stuff. So I want to set the stage a little bit by having you imagine a kid with their hand in the cookie jar. When they get caught, or actually, it's probably a better analogy to say the kid has their hand in some sort of vat of treacherous poison and they're caught. And all of a sudden, they try to backpedal and tell you, "Well, oh no, wait, it wasn't me, and it was that person over there, and it'll never happen again." And all of a sudden, they scramble and make up all sorts of stuff to try to get away with the thing that they were doing. That's what we have clearly with BlackRock and Vanguard and these places. So here's the way that I look at it. We've got all of this wokadoodle left stuff that seems to be coming out of the woodwork and coming at us from every angle, everywhere, from schools and education to healthcare to finance, even just going to the store now. For the last several years, we've had these wokadoodle little goofy stickers on this floor to show us where we're supposed to put our feet, and the stupid thing they did with like 6 feet of social distancing and then 12 feet and then two masks and one mask and however many shots we're supposed to be up to now if we were paying attention to the wokadoodle left that are trying to just move us around like cattle and capitalize and make money off of us and bankrupt our country. But for those of us who don't pay attention to them and ignore them or fight back, preferably the fight back type, we need a lot more of those. For those of us who are paying attention, there's sort of a pattern. There's a track record here of um, people understanding where the markets are going, setting themselves up to get rich, and then deploying money in meaningful ways so that they can make themselves wealthier. So, what do I mean by that? In normal markets, if we have free markets and open markets that are clear and transparent without people manipulating them, then you go out or an investment manager goes out on your behalf or stockbroker or somebody and looks for good companies and then tries to buy the right things and hold them at the right time to try to get a good return on that investment. And in order to get a good return on that investment, what's required is that company actually has to do the thing that they're supposed to do. So if they're a retail operation or a restaurant or something, they have to do it well and grow and earn money and make profit in order to get a return to you, the investor. That's the sane world where rational people live. However, we now have a world of irrational nonsense players, um, and they do all sorts of twisted, manipulative things. It used to be the case where we thought of our politicians, our elected representatives, and you have to use that term very loosely these days. They're not actually representatives because they've clearly given up on the idea or notion of representing us. They represent their wallets and pocketbook and maybe the the corporate interests of the people that lobby for them and against them and with them and et cetera. So for those people, if they can closely align with regulatory bodies, regulators, they can control markets and they can predict markets. So I'm going to use as an analogy the grocery store bags. So I'm old enough to remember when there were paper grocery store bags, and we were told, in spite of the fact that we could clearly look at the companies that grew trees and turned those into paper grocery store bags, and then actually all of the reuse of those paper bags because they were actually pretty handy, and lots of people reused them for lots of different things. Um, or they used them, they rolled them up and put them in, made a fire or whatever, used them as kindling. I don't know, whatever, all kinds of things that you could actually do with paper bags. But we were told that in spite of really good forest management and all of the companies that actually grew trees as a crop in order to create those paper bags, that we needed to switch to plastic because plastic was going to save the rainforest. Well, imagine for a moment, and it shouldn't take too much creative imagination to imagine that you are sitting in Washington, D.C., and you're one of the regulators, or at your state capitol if you happen to be in California, and you roll out this edict that the state stores, retail, the shoe outlet, whatever, everybody had to switch from paper to plastic. Now imagine, if you will, that you happen to have $1 million laying around and you invest $1 million in the company that makes the plastic bags. Well, poof, voila, you stand to make a lot of extra money. That's where the whole insider trading thing comes from, and it's a continuing concern. It is a continuing point of contention between we the people and our, again, I have to use that term very loosely, representative, quote unquote. I'll just air quote that. They're representatives choosing not to represent we the people. But so that's one small example. We switched from paper to plastic. And now, lo and behold, near me, the grocery stores are switching from plastic to paper. But along the way, weird things happened. And once again, we find an example of the left actually doing more harm to the thing that they say that they're trying to save than good. Case in point, in California, I was made aware recently that it was discovered that the efforts to reduce plastic actually led to more plastic going into the landfills. Here's what that looks like. And it's just another example of the goofy wackadoodle left, but they don't care. They don't care clearly about anything or anyone other than money. So in this instance, I'm told via a series of newspaper articles that I read in great detail that California dictated that the little plastic bags used at places like grocery stores had to have a certain recycled content. Well, as soon as you add recycled content to the plastic got thicker. So there's actually more material to it. Well, what people found in California is that the consumers actually used the plastic bag in the very same way. They used them as a disposable bag. Many people were careless with them, and they ended up in waterways and in parks and all that stuff. And so they did some calculations and figured out that if new plastic were used, it's about 30% thinner. Using recycled plastic in the plastic bags meant that the bag thickness was about 30% more material. Same number of consumers, although actually in California, I think there are fewer consumers because I think they're sort of effectively seem to be bankrupting everyone. But that's life on the left. Um, but so it's another example of the left saying, hey, give us all your money and all power and we'll make this thing better. And then flash forward a few years and the thing is actually worse. That's what they do. So another prime example in today's life is the electric vehicle. You can clearly see what was intended. And actually, some alert readers have sent me articles about cars I didn't even know about. Apparently, there were some battery powered electric vehicles that predate the combustion engine by about 50 years, I'm told. So there was electricity. It was not prevalent, but there was electricity, and there were these little vehicles that had a massive battery that could store power, and apparently it was charged and it could drive around a little bit. And when the combustion engine came along, it was so revolutionary, new, and so efficient, such a leap in efficiency to have the production of energy there locally in the vehicle, that it was revolutionary and amazing. And so the Model T Ford came out, and all sorts of cars ensued, and lots of years and incremental pushes for better and better fuel efficiency. So we have these little small cars now, some of them like the size of a little go-kart, that get a zillion miles per gallon or whatever it is nowadays. And we have all this increased fuel efficiency, and we've gotten amazingly good. And so right around the time when we're sort of hitting that peak of efficiency, I firmly believe that a whole bunch of people came along, kind of like the flipping back and forth between paper and plastic, and said, well, if we mandate that everybody must now have electric vehicle, that we have all the component parts that go with that, all the mining for rare earth precious minerals, precious metals, etc. What's the term I'm looking for? Rare earth minerals that go into battery making. The people who predicted that, or were able to see that that mandate was coming, and invested in the right things at the right time, like battery manufacturer, etc., and all the ancillary technology that goes along with creating electric vehicles, those people stand to make extraordinary sums of money. Not to put too fine a point on this, but I have to pause and interject that that works with shots as well. If you can mandate that babies, children, need shots by a certain age, and if you can invest in the makers of those shots, you can make a lot of money. And then imagine, hypothetically speaking, that you roll out a massive global fear of a wave of death that's going to come from some sort of new novel virus. And if everybody doesn't get one, two, three, four, five, six, seven-ish shots, that everybody's going to die, and that the whole world is like 60% going to doom and they're going to die, etc., then maybe you can actually create mandates that force people to go and get this shot. And then if you're, let's say, a politician that has $1 million or 50 million sitting around to put into the manufacture of that product, then lo and behold, poof, you can make massive multitudes on your money. By the way, if that environment were to present itself, then if you were really especially devious, you could actually take advantage of something called an emergency use authorization. Easy for me to say. Emergency use authorization for that medicine. And once that happens, all of the quality controls are drastically reduced for how much quality has to go into the creation and manufacturing of those shots. And so in that environment, you could actually get into the billions of shots all over the world because you're mandating those. My point is, in all of these circumstances, you're actually able to not predict, but actually control the market. You can push the market in a certain direction. By the way, I'm going to pause for a moment because there's ongoing confusion about things like the drop in stock price of things like Target and Anheuser-Busch, which is the parent company of Bud Light, and Disney and Netflix and places like it that have shown some woke-a-doodle activity, and then their stock prices dropped. Well, two things to know about that. One is, if you are the type of person, let's say, for instance, a politician who was able to control and push the market, and let's say that you're a politician who views the people of the world like sheep, and you think that they're all sheeple, and you all just herd them in the right direction and tell them what they must and must not do, then not only do you stand to make a lot of money, but here's a part that not everybody gets, but it's important to remember. You can make money up or down, good or bad. What I mean by that is, if you can predict that a company's stock price is going to go down, if you know that in advance, you can make massive amounts of money. It's called shorting. There are actually several ways of going about doing it, but in general, it's called shorting. You can short a company if you can predict when it's going to go down. And so let's say that if you're a really particularly nefarious, crafty creature, you anticipate or you can plan to do something really bad or damaging or disruptive or harmful to a company, you can short that company in advance. I don't recommend it because unless you are some sort of protected class, like maybe a politician or something, this is actually illegal, as it should be for everybody, including politicians. But if you were a crafty sort of person that somehow managed to create for yourself an exemption from all of the reasonable and justified laws protecting consumers and the world from evil people like you could do some harm to a company and watch the fallout and watch the stock price drop and make massive amounts of money. You can bank big money on that. Also, there's another piece that's talked about regularly among all my insurance friend peers about there's what's it called, catastrophic insurance or catastrophe insurance or something. You can buy insurance on your company if you happen to know that it's just about to be destroyed, and make a lot of money off of that for doing nothing. So there are some really crafty, really devious people out there. And I'm not saying that many of them happen to find their way into politics, but I am saying that there are some people that find their way into politics without very much money and leave some years later with many, many millions and millions of dollars. And that brings me around to something called Rule 144. If you're not familiar with it, you should be looking it up and paying attention. Look at our politicians and the corporate owners of major corporations are required to disclose their um, their stock trades and what's in their portfolio, um, which if you follow those and then look at the regulations, you can start to see some correlation, I believe. But that brings us around to this interesting article from Fox Business where we have this whole greeny meanie thing, this whole climate action, globalist climate strategy thing. So I've lost track. I think we're in like the 12th iteration of climate fear. It used to be global cooling and then global warming and then global freezing and now global boiling. And about every decade, somebody new comes along with a big, scary edict that the whole world's about to boil or sea levels rise or something. And they attach a year to it, and we have to act quickly. And then they come out with all this fear, and then they end up rich and they sort of drift off to their private islands and their private jets and yachts and boats and ships and whatever. And so those rich people go off, and we, the people, end up suffering. And then 10 years go by, and there's a new fear tactic. Well, we're in the whatever iteration, 12th. This one's called like global boiling or something. So, in order to combat that, we have things like what is this? It's the United Nations Climate Alliance. It is formed to combat global warming through corporate sustainability agreements. Doesn't that sound lovely and rosy? Except it's fictional nonsense. And now the world is kind of figuring it out. You have a lot of major media coming out now with actual scientists who are stepping up. And in spite of them getting doxxed and attacked and vilified all over the legacy media, they're just telling people, look, this has been done 12 times before, and it's a scam and a gimmick and etc. So word is kind of getting out. I think that companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street Capital Global, etc., all came out years ago and just jumped on this ESG bandwagon. Hoorah, it's a time to predict the markets, and we can just invest where everyone is about to be told they have to go because of regulations, because of environmental, social, and governance. You get it? That's how the racket works. Except we, the people, are kind of onto them. We have things like the Netherlands farmers and truckers all over the world who are fighting back and saying no, because we've figured out that that stuff, this lurch to the left, march toward global communism, it ends when we say no. So we're fighting back, and suddenly now we have this big article out from Fox News that says that all these companies are saying, "Oh, whoops, mea culpa. What? Wait, maybe we went too far too fast. Oh gosh, we're going to stop doing all this ESG stuff and just trust us now because we're really wow, we're going to not do all this ESG investing things because the people don't like it." Well, just like the kids sticking their hand in the jar, pay attention because I believe it's all just a big act and they plan on finding other avenues or just giving it lip service and still continuing to do the horrible things that they do because these companies clearly are showing a strong desire not to anticipate the markets, but to shape and form the markets and force people into it. Things like the switch back and forth between electric car and gas powered vehicles and the switch back and forth between paper and plastic, etc. When these people and companies and politicians and globalists, when these horrible people are able to predict what's about to happen because they're forcing it to happen, they stand to make a lot of money. Don't trust the article. And most importantly, get your money out of those places. There's more news coming within the next 2 weeks about huge reports that are coming out on BlackRock and Vanguard. You're not going to want to miss those and some others. But in the meantime, get your money out, get them into reasonable America, Western values focused investments that are not turning their back on America and the West. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes and those two big reports in about 2 weeks. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. Thanks for listening to another episode